Japanese tanks are some of the most interesting and kind of unique vehicles that we have in the game, and all three of the top tier tanks are what we're going to be showcasing in today's video, showing why these tanks are some of the ones that you want to be picking up in World of Tanks, and also how they differ between each other and the sort of things that you need to be keeping an eye out for when you see them on the battlefield. So without further ado, we do have the STB-1. We're going to showcase the sort of thing you can do on Prokhorovka in your medium tanks that have gun depression and somewhat bouncy turrets like the STB-1, albeit there are some weak points that you can pen on a tank like this. But with the excellent accuracy and also the damage per minute that this vehicle has, makes it very competitive, at least for the most part when you're playing up against the other tier 10 mediums in the game. And we're going to see an excellent round of exactly what this tank is all about, you know, peaking ridgelines using 14 degrees of gun depression because it has, of course, hydropneumatic suspension, and just being able to work a ridgeline super well, as well as being able to bounce a few rounds. So how can you play this tank to its strengths? Well, of course, getting into a position quickly is what it can do. It has 50 kilometers an hour top speed, which is more than enough for most medium tanks in the game to be able to get forward and get into a nice position. Its power to weight ratio is not too bad either, 25 horsepower to ton, which is good, and that allows you to really get up to top speed as well as, you know, accelerate away when you need to, and use the 25 kilometers an hour reverse speed to back down those hills and make the angle of that turret super hard to be able to hit reliably, which is how you've seen 2200 block damage happen with the STB-1. Now, if a player knows exactly how to pen this thing, then yes, they are going to be able to pen the turret of the STB-1, since you do have positions on the mantlet kind of area where you can pen here and here, especially when it's using gun depression. You're looking up into it, you can essentially pen underneath the gun. But for the most part, it's hard to actually pen this thing. It does have a cupola, but when you're using gun depression, once again, it does hide that cupola to the point where you're not going to be able to hit it. So easy use of ridgelines is what this tank can do, and it's why this tank is very good when it is in that sort of playstyle. Now you can see in Prokhorovka there are both the enemy light tanks taken out in this game, which means that he's able to push into a position that you wouldn't typically expect, as well as the fact that he has that mobility to move around the map, to reposition, make it difficult for the opponents to know exactly what he's going to be doing, and you can crop up in so many positions with this tank that make it very powerful. And you can see here just good use of the bushes, staying behind them. Unfortunately does get spotted just simply because it is so close, and potentially the 80 phase 1 got a slight line of sight, you never know, but for the most part, yeah, very powerful. Now in terms of this game in particular, you can see that the enemy team, there is a lot of vehicles camping on their tank line in the one line, which is very expected. It is the common place for a lot of vehicles to be camping over in this area by the bushes, getting shots on hopefully all of your friendly team who are going to be sat waiting to be farmed if a light tank can spot. Now the enemy team have lost both of their light tanks, which allows for a more aggressive gameplay style where you can start to push against some opponents, because it's harder for you to be perma spotted. You know when you're spotted most of the time, and you can just basically use this center ridge to be able to farm up a lot of damage, and that is exactly what this tank is all about, just being a pure nuisance on a ridge line, being able to spot people using the decent view range, and being able to just basically be a bit of a poacher of damage throughout the entire game. And that is what you don't necessarily get with some of the other mediums. Now yes, you can get tanks with, you know, 10 degrees of gun depression, etc. You just don't get them with that mix of a decent turret alongside 14 degrees of gun depression, which is what this tank offers you. The hydropneumatic suspension, you see it on the Swedish TDs, it is very similar, and I really wanted to show off these gameplays because, you know, this is the top tier, the pinnacle of what you can expect with these vehicles. And of course we have the Ho-Ri coming up, and we've also got the Type 5 Heavy, the heavy tank at tier 10, which is once again another unique style heavy tank that, you know, there are tanks similar to it, E100, Maus and stuff like that, but they don't get the derp gun that you do get, or the high kind of impact gun that you get with the Type 5. And there are, you know, 2 guns that you can use on the Type 5, and for the most part the smaller gun with 600 alpha, I think it's like a 140mm or something like that. Yeah, that's the one you want to actually be using when you're playing in that vehicle, since it's just way more consistent than the derp gun, and you're going to be able to perform a lot better. Now, as you see, this tank's just perfect at being able to just be a nuisance, and this is how you can play in your own tanks. You're seeing a good use of this rock. This is really a late game position when your team are winning and you have no real problems from being able to be hit in the side. You can essentially just sit here and farm up the damage on tanks like the 257, the AE phase 1, and it's a spot that you want to be thinking about. Now, maybe he pushed here a little bit too quickly. There are a lot of shots coming in. They're able to hit the hull armor of the vehicle since he's exposing it, but I mean, he can just sit there and out DPM all of these very easily. And I mean, picking up over 10,000 damage, and there is still 10,000 damage left on the enemy team. So just a stunning round so far within this game. And I'm sure that, you know, there's an aspect of, you know, sometimes you have to be a little bit lucky to have results like this, but also you don't see that many vehicles being able to do this damage being bad in the game. You know, there are a small number of tanks that are capable of dealing damage this high, and the STB1 is definitely one of them. It is a super strong vehicle, and you can see in this late game stage, a player with 3 marks, obviously knowing what they're doing in the STB, pushes down into the bowl. It's going to be hard for the enemy team to spot, and they certainly would have to be pre-aiming that spot for it to be able to actually hit him. But luckily, staying undetected, pushes into the bowl, and now it's really just a case of waiting for the teammates in things like the Type 4, who's just going to YOLO in, obviously going to get spotted and shot at, but maybe spot someone on the enemy team. And this is stuff you can use in your own gameplay, is that, you know, when your team are doing maybe necessarily stupid things, I mean, it's not a bad play at this stage in the game, especially if he's done no damage, to push in and try and get some spotted damage. It is something that you can utilize yourself, and that's why he's been able to get a little few shots here and there at this stage. And when you've only got 440 hit points to yourself, you know, you're a one shot for a lot of the enemy tanks. The Gorilla, you've got Leopard PTA, who could potentially high roll, you've got the T95, all of which could easily be able to take you out if they get a little bit lucky. But I mean, it's easy to be able to now just farm up the rest of the damage. Loads the HE of, or standard round maybe, and unfortunately doesn't actually manage to pen the artillery, which is fantastic. But the STB does indeed get that damage reduction from what it previously had, I believe, and so it goes down to 360, which makes it somewhat different to a lot of the other mediums at this tier, because, you know, you're traditionally looking at 390, 400, and even some of them having 440 if you're looking at the 430U, which kind of separates this out. It is a more fast firing, and it gives you that option to play very kind of all around. You're able to do a lot of different things, and you're able to retrack opponents, spot for your team, and just play it quite versatile, which is what is great about playing tanks like this, and being able to be this influential. And there you go. I mean, 12,000 damage with only a Leopard PTA last alive on the enemy team, probably next to the T95, just waiting for him to get spotted. And I mean, the STB1, just a really, really decent vehicle, and certainly one that is not overpowered. I don't think anyone's going to say it's ridiculously overpowered or anything like that, but it is very, very strong, and a tank that I think is very underrated. But let's move on, because that's not the only one we're showcasing today. Now, the next replay that we do has is, of course, the Type 5, and it starts off with a bit of a bang, a nice little 629 roll to hit the T10, and of course using the smaller gun on the Type 5, as you probably should do with this vehicle, and that is because of the fact that it is just way more consistent. You're able to deal a ton more damage overall, to be honest with you, and enables the Type 5 to be able to be a bit more dominant in games like this, especially when you're coming up against more accurate tanks, things like the Super Conqueror, things like the M60, and all of the other kind of medium tanks that are going to be playing up against, obviously Super Conqueror being a heavy tank, but you get my gist. They have very, very good accuracy for the type of class that they're playing. And so having that increased accuracy, having that increased damage per minute, and just being able to be a bit of a nuisance to the opponents by being that kind of brawling heavy tank with a ton of armor, and really relying on people firing premium. As you all know, the premium rounds against the Type 5 is essentially just the main way to take one of these things out. It does have the weak point here, it has the weak point here, it has the cupola, it has cheeks that can be penned if it angles but have to have high penetration to do that. It has a lower plate slash frontal flat plate that could be penned as well, but has to have super high penetration, and I'm talking about, you know, heat rounds from some of the highest caliber guns in the game with high penetration as well. So yeah, I mean, this tank is very, very good. It is solid, and is one of the tanks that I think is probably the easiest tank to play when you're a newer player. I mean, it is just a case of enemy tanks will bounce off of you occasionally, and all you have to do is basically turn your tank towards them and hope they don't get around the side of you. Protect yourself from being able to be hit. You're seeing there a good use of actually using obstacles to avoid people being able to hit the kind of weak plates that we have on the left and right side, and that's how he finishes off the M60 there without taking another hit. So really, really good use of this game. But the team are not doing well, but this is what this kind of huge vehicle, the Type 5, is all about. It's about being able to just ammo rack people, apparently. But lovely one on the WZ. It wouldn't be like a Chinese tank to get ammo racked, would it? But either way, a very lucky kind of ammo rack there, but nonetheless it allows him to actually try and deal with some of these tanks. In a drive wheel, the Super Conqueror there finishes him off and deals with a very strong tier 10 heavy tank. But he still has this Minotauro who's behind him. He's got some people directly in front, and when you do try and push a tank like the 140, for example, you are going to have to give your side armor to try and hit this guy if you want to go in there and try and get around him or do something like that. But this game not looking good. They're down by 5,000 hit points, and having done 5,800 damage, I mean, you could pretty much end it here and have a brilliant game. I mean, most people would be fairly happy with a nice little 6k damage, but this game certainly doesn't stop like that, and the power of the Type 5 is going to carry on throughout this game. Now, when you're in this sort of situation, you do need to press opponents, because the longer and longer time you leave the opponents doing to be able to kind of just sit back and hope that you make a mistake, the more and more of a nightmare you're going to have, and this is a perfect play. The 140, obviously thinking that he can get around, used the slim profile to avoid being hit by the Type 5, but in fact he backs up, he uses this little outstand of the building here to be able to block the 140 from coming out, and then reverses back, gets a free shot into him, and of course gets the extra damage, and then finishes off the E50. So he's starting to bring some level of the hit point disadvantage back. It is still a 2 versus 8 game, so there is a lot to do, and with a 60 TP closing in, a Minotauro on full health, it is not looking good. And oh crap, a FV215B183, not the tank you want to be coming up against. Tries to angle to avoid taking the hit, but it looks like the FV actually landed the shell into this location here, which is of course the weak point, and yeah, not ideal whatsoever. And with the FV being able to just keep on doing this, and you not being able to finish him off in one shot, yeah, I mean, it's not ideal whatsoever. And especially once you've done the damage that you have in a monster like this, I mean, it really does rely upon, you know, bouncing a few rounds, getting a little bit lucky. The FV actually bounces, which is nice, but he needs to finish him off, or at least deal with some of the vehicles left in the game. If he can deal with this T54 and then try and deal with the FV, he might be able to do a little bit better. But with all of the tanks starting to close in, what he does is perfect. I mean, this is the ideal situation you want to do with a tank like this, which is essentially pulling back so that all of the opponents are going to have to try and poke you and deal damage that way. The FV just YOLOs the shot, The 60 TP now coming in. Can he get one more off before he's taken out? Yes, he can. Easy as you like. And you probably wouldn't have been able to do this in something like an E100. The E100 just has that kind of, you know, lower plate that as soon as people actually get close to you, they can pretty much pen you every time. And you're seeing the Type 5 being able to actually deal with some of these. Now, you'll see that there was a UDES left alive who is more than likely going to be trying to come around from the behind if he's a somewhat skilled player. And then, of course, the FV manages to pen, well, he just fires HE, which derps him down, but a brilliant, brilliant game. 10,900 damage, and unfortunately, even with a team that, you know, threw away the majority of their hit points easily, he still picked up 10,900 and over 10k blocked, which you can safely say probably wouldn't happen in a tank like the E100. So an astonishingly good heavy tank when it's used in the right way, and when you do find yourself where there are a lot of opponents that you can keep ploughing away, and you know, sometimes you do have to take the damage, but it's about taking the damage in the right place, and that is what the Type 5 does fantastically, and why it is one of the more kind of annoying to play but still a decent heavy tank overall. And hopefully that this gameplay did show that. Now we've seen the medium, we've seen the heavy tank, and can the TD hold up to being what is expected as a fantastic tier 10? And it certainly can, because this has some of the highest damage consistently on the What Replay site right now, and that is because a lot of people underestimate how good this thing is right now, how nice it is to see such high alpha damage but with a really consistent gun and just a very flexible, annoying tank to play up against. And you're seeing here one of the more overpowered tier 8s in the game, if not the most overpowered tier 8s, which is the BZ176. I'm sure you're very well acquainted, but of course he's been able to go straight through the turret, and that's because the standard round penetration of this vehicle is 305 and the premium you've got 360, which is very good indeed. Allows you to really punish some of those heavy tanks and some of the most heavily armored turreted tanks in the game as well. So really good use of this tank. And what you'll find here is that an aggressive position on the hill on Malinovka wouldn't typically be what you expect from a tier 10 tank destroyer. You'd expect them to be sat in the back, you'd expect them to be camping in the bushes somewhere like this Ho-Ri 2, who's of course had a brilliant game so far, but the Ho-Ri is one of the tanks that is capable of really dealing a ton of damage and keeping itself pretty healthy when you do manage to hide the lower plate of this thing. Now it does have armor that can be penned. The enemy team seem to be focusing everyone but the tank that's peppering them with shells, and now the enemy team is starting to turn around. Haha, Mr. Overpowered, he's gone from the game, and another one who of course underestimated this vehicle, and there's a 57 heavy who's of course thinking he's funny, and unfortunately for him and of course this IS-2, they're about to find out what a special source of Japanese origin is about to actually release onto them. And with the 57 heavy now unloading, he's fired at least 2 plus a couple more when he was attacking some of his teammates. He's able to really just go in and start pumping this guy from the back. Now yeah, I know it sounds dodge, and if it was dodge, please let me know. But of course, if you are enjoying this video so far, do think about subscribing to the channel, and if you don't want to do that, then please do consider liking the video, as it massively helps me out and boosts it up in the algorithm, so any help would be much appreciated. But more importantly is, what can you do up against a tank like this? Because on the ridgeline, what you have is a tank that has a decent superstructure. When you're on a ridgeline, you're aiming up into it, it has even better armor than typically you'd expect. And that's because on the flat, it's got very flat armor. It is just a pen lockable kind of a pen, essentially. I don't really... Basically, if you have enough pen, you're going to pen it. If you don't have enough pen, you're not going to pen it, and that is typical of all of these kind of Japanese tanks in the game, and essentially their main weakness is just premium rounds. But you do have this lower plate, which is almost paper, to be honest, and you can pen it quite easily. But of course, when you are trying to take this thing out, you have to be sure that you're going to be dealing more than 700 damage and hopefully out traversing it. So your best bet is to try and lock down the tracks, because this thing turns. It turns super quickly, and if you don't keep an eye on how quickly this turns, you are going to be left in the dust pretty quickly. Now the enemy team, like the ST2 on their team and also some of the other tanks, are starting to push up, which makes this tank in a bit of a vulnerable position, because he has to do something to get hold down, but he's having to move back down the hill, which then allows the enemy team to get hold down, and then exposes that lower plate because they're now looking down into you. So yeah, it's not the best situation you can be in a tank like this. But what he does especially here is that the most credible threat out of these three vehicles is probably this ST2 right now. The Vipera, it is a good tank. It has a super long inch-clip reload. It's looking at someone else. The 257, he's too far back. It's this ST2 that needs to go, and he shuts him down with a nice little shot there. Now, out of the two vehicles that are over here, you've got a 257 and you've got this Vipera. Now the Vipera has decent penetration, so you need to get him out the game, as well as avoid trying to get any more of these artillery shells coming into the side of you. And of course he shuts down the Vipera, going straight through the turret, as you can expect with a huge gun like this and the penetration that it gets. And now he's really secured this hill area. But as we always say on Malinovka, you don't want to push down the hill, because you get the campers here, you get the campers sat in this bush over here, you get the campers sat on this corner, you can get people in these bushes over here, and essentially it's just one of those things where you want to win the hill, but you don't want to push down it. You want to use the hill to farm up anyone that gets spotted, and hopefully some of your teammates are going to be left alive to go into the position where the light tanks will go and sit in this bush to be able to spot for you, and then you can farm them from the side. Now unfortunately it doesn't actually happen. Team looking pretty disappointed in the chat with how the game's gone, and with a lot of the enemy team still unspotted, and of course some of the TDs on the enemy team is still sitting in base. It's a bit risky to go in. Now the IS-7 has to go because he's going to try and spot, and the Lion does get spotted. The autoloader, can he finish him off? He does hit him, but he doesn't finish him off. Not ideal whatsoever. And with a tank in the base, which is always good, I love a good capper in World of Tanks, he does manage to try and push this side. Now the whole of his team are really over here. There's the GW Pig, who's in the base obviously, and there are a few vehicles over here to stop them from pushing the base. Now this Borsa gets shut down pretty quickly. GW Tiger Pig actually helps out the team for once, and he finishes off the Borsig, which is brilliant. But there are still a lot of vehicles that could be a nuisance. The Lion's over here somewhere, and he's just trying to get as many shots as possible. 11,000 damage so far. And when you're in this sort of situation in a game like this, I mean, regardless of the tank you're in, you have to think about all of the options. What are my best options for trying to deal with this game? Now you have this Object 257, who's not going to be a threat. He's not going to be able to spot you for the most part, unless of course you're really close to him. So what he does is, the base needs to be reset. So what he does is come back down the hill. This is often a tactic you'll have to use. And then he tries to go over here. This is what I would be thinking, to come over into this position or go into this position, or potentially if he can spot from somewhere in a bush on this location, he can spot the cap and then decap it, and then he can try and deal with the game. Now we have no idea who it is in the cap. It's probably this medium tank. Not the medium tank, it's probably the KPZ or the artillery even, because we all know the 257 is locked down over there. He does actually try and go for the shot on him, helping out the IS-7, unfortunately a little bit too late, then bounces, because of course the shot that you need to hit bounces. He does try and go for this shot again, since he has to deal with this guy at some point, otherwise it's going to come back to bite him. He puts one in, but is it too late to now reset the cap? Can he get there? Can he aim? Can he get the shot in? He really needs this artillery to be able to help him out here, and of course that's what it's all about. He does manage to spot the KPZ, pulls back behind the bush, remains undetected, resets the cap, easy as you like. A really, really good one here, and hopefully he can finish him off here. The KPZ doesn't decide to go into turbo mode, which slows him right down, and he finishes him off. There's still a Minotauro on full health, however, and a Lion, and the Lion can be one of those tanks that can crop up anywhere. He could genuinely go up the hill, he could come from here, he could be coming all the way around from behind. It really depends on what this Lion decides to do. The Minotauro, we have no idea where he is. Is he sat over by the bushes here? Is he going to be sat behind this ridge here? Is he going to be in the base? Is he going to be camping in the tree line? There's literally no idea. So when you're in this sort of game, you have to think about what you need to do now. And the best option, to be honest with you, even though it's annoying, is to try and hope that you can spot this Lion by him making an overcommitment. And that is really the only way you can probably win this game, is the Lion needs to go. It's the most important tank to get rid of. And if you don't do it, he's going to crop up, he's going to finish you off, and probably a lot quicker than the Minotauro is going to do. So goes up the hill, or at least tries to go to a position where he can get a shot onto potentially the Lion who's going to be on the hill, and hopefully can come away with the win. Now then, as you'd expect, the Lion does indeed actually get spotted on the hill, and he's able to find him caught out in the open. An easy shot there, doesn't even receive one in return. The only tank that's going to be able to hit him is the artillery, who misses. Brilliant. Perfect. This is what you want. But Minotauro is still left alive. Is he going to be helping the Lion? Is he going to be coming up here? Is he going to end up spotting you from above, at which point you are basically finished? And is he going to catch you from the side? Now, we have no idea. Hopefully the GW Tiger P is going to be able to provide some support to at least take a few hit points off the Minotauro, or be able to hit him in a bit of an annoying spot. But with the Ho-Ri having done 12,700 damage, carrying this game super hard, can he actually win? Now, unfortunately, the Minotauro does actually go all the way around the map to then deal with the GW Tiger Pig, which is super annoying, and it is actually one of the most, might have been one of the best plays he could have done, because the Ho-Ri is going to be trying to seek him down, he's going to try and find him, and the GW Tiger Pig can then help with him. But instead, it's now flipped, and the Ho-Ri is going to have to try and chase down the Minotauro with the support of the M4043. And you never really know whether the M4043 is still going to be in base, or whether he's following closely behind the Minotauro to avoid any shells, maybe sitting in this location here. But yeah, it's just a case of now realizing that the M40 has gone in the base. So yeah, not ideal. He's putting pressure onto the Ho-Ri. They can't cap anyway. I mean, it's just a case of trying to get this M40 out of the game now. And with the Minotauro now going to try and support with anyone that's going to push the M40, hopefully he can deal with the damage. Now he shoots on the move, which is probably one of the biggest misplays he's made right here. He could have dealt with that guy and then maybe got some and come away with some damage on this Minotauro. But I mean, he's going again on the move, just shoots him, Amaraks him of course, because why wouldn't you? And we've seen 2 Amaraks now in what, 3 games of these Japanese boys. But yeah, the Minotauro catches him in the side, as you can expect. He's on a ridge. He's going to be in a painful position. He's firing heat rounds, which are the bane of the Ho-Ri's existence. He actually bounces there. And can he get a shot into the Minotauro? It's a very slim shot into the lower plate. He does actually hit it, but with the angling of the armor, it still doesn't matter, as he does manage to hit the superstructure with the high penetration. And yeah, I mean, if I'd done 13,871 damage and lost to a Minotauro on full health at the end of the game, that's probably been camping and just finishes off the GW Tiger P and you for like, what, 1,000 damage? Yeah, I mean, not the result you wanted, but of course showing off the power that this vehicle has. And hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Let me know what you think of all 3 of these tanks. Are some of them terrible? Are they great? I think you can all agree that they are fairly unique for each of their playstyles, and hopefully this video did them justice, and I'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to subscribe if you want better RNG than these boys.